Hey guys, this is Caleb with DSLR Video Shooter, and today we're going to take a look at a $250 wireless HDMI system, and then we'll build a director's monitor that'll work with any monitor and any camera. Recently, Nyrius reached out to me with an opportunity to review their Aries Pro. Now, I know there's a couple of people out there that have used this for video production, so I was curious to play with one and see how well it worked. So this is a wireless 1080p transmitter and receiver. In the box, you will find two primary devices, the larger receiver and a small transmitter dongle. There's also an HDMI cable, a 90-degree HDMI adapter, a mini USB cable for the transmitter, and a power supply for the receiver, which is also mini USB. Setup is pretty straightforward. You have to supply power to both the transmitter and the receiver, which is 5 volts for each. Hook the transmitter up to any HDMI device, in my case, in most of our cases, a camera, and then run an HDMI cable from the receiver to a monitor or TV. So here you see me setting all this up on my desk here, and I'm just running power from the wall, but we'll look at some battery options here in a little bit. Once I had everything plugged in, it automatically powered up and immediately showed me the image, which was pretty impressive. I didn't have to go through any pairing or anything like that. Right out of the gate with the transmitter and the receiver right next to each other, I did notice there's a tiny latency delay, but to me, this isn't the end of the world because I would not use a setup like this, on a rig or as an operator. This is more for a director, producer, client, someone to have a remote way to look at the image. So, having it exactly 0 millisecond delay isn't necessarily a requirement for me. So now that we know it works and it seems to be working really well, let's talk about putting together a mobile wireless monitoring setup or a director's monitor. There are tons of different ways to do this, but this is the setup that I came up with a couple affordable parts from Amazon, as well as a couple things I had laying around here in the studio. I started with this 15mm handle kit that you can purchase with everything already assembled from Newer on Amazon. This kit costs $27. It comes with one 15mm rod, two 15mm compatible handles, and a 90mm adapter. And this kit is going to be the base of our system. Next, I added two 8-inch long carbon fiber 15mm rods. These were also from Amazon and came in at $14. You can probably find them cheaper on Amazon or on eBay if you search a little bit. So at this point, we have the foundation for our entire setup, and I want to set this up so that we can use any monitor and we'll have a little bit of flexibility with how we position the monitor. So the next step is to figure out how to mount the monitor to this rig. What I ended up using was just a bunch of random parts that I had laying around and not necessarily the best setup or most affordable setup for this rig. What you want is a 15mm clamp that has a centered male or female 1/4-20 thread. So again, this is a hacked up cheese plate setup I put together just because I didn't have exactly what I needed. Something like this or this will work really well, and you can find them all over the place on Amazon or eBay, and I'll have a couple links in the description if you want to check those out. From there, I attached a monitor ball head, and that's going to allow us to easily mount our monitor. And the beauty of this setup is you can set the entire thing down on a tabletop and it's not going to scratch anything because of those rubber handles. And since we're using a ball head, we can set the whole thing down on the table and reorient the screen. This is great if you don't want to be carrying something around, you just want to set it down on the desk or on the ground even, and be able to monitor a camera. With all that done, we need to now mount the receiver and some kind of power solution to the rig. For power, I'm going to be using this 12-volt battery. And what's really unique about this battery is, first of all, it has a huge capacity. It's going to last a long time, and it has several outputs. This battery can output 12 volts, 9 volts, and 5 volts via USB, all simultaneously. What this means is we'll be able to power the monitor and the receiver all from one battery. The other thing I like about this battery, it has a nice physical switch, so we'll be able to instantly power everything off and on, and there won't be any battery drain. Another cool feature is that it has battery level indicators so you can keep track of how much juice you have left. A perfect place to mount all of this is right behind the monitor directly to the 15mm rods. To get started, I took the receiver and peeled off the little rubber feet. I always keep a giant box of zip ties in the studio, so I went ahead and used those to zip tie the receiver down onto the rods. This way I can easily remove the receiver if I ever need to. It's not a glue glued on or anything like that, and it's definitely not going to go anywhere. If you do use zip ties, just make sure you don't block any jacks or ports on the receiver. Next, on the other side of the 15mm rods, I went ahead and zip tied on the battery. Again, this will make removing the battery if I ever need to very easy. You just want to make sure you don't block any of the ports or the power button. And I'm not worried about the sliding around because the 15mm adapters actually act as stops, so there's no way this battery is going to come flying out of the rig. Things are coming along really nicely here, and the only thing we have left to do is run our cables. We're going to run 5 volts from the battery to the receiver and 12 volts or 9 volts depending on what kind of monitor you're using to the monitor. Double check the specs on your monitor to make sure you're using the right amount of power. Most monitors use 12 volts, but some of them have a range, so that'll give you several options for powering up your monitor. Once all the wires are run, you can do some cable management. Again, those zip ties come in really handy. And with that done, the receiving end of this entire wireless setup is all complete. Next, let's work on the transmitter. If you're using a larger camera like a C100, you could easily mount this to the handle somewhere, but I decided to make this challenging and mount it to the top of my A6300. For power, again, we're going to be needing 5 volts, and there are a ton of 5-volt batteries out there, which are really, really great. I prefer the Anker brand stuff. It's insanely well made, lots of safety features in place. In the end, I opted to go with their smaller lipstick tube style battery, which is roughly the same size as the transmitter. While rummaging through a drawer of rigging parts, I came across this cold shoe extender. This is designed to add multiple cold shoe devices to the top of your camera, and that's going to hold the battery really well, and then we can just attach the transmitter on top of that. Sticking with the zip tie theme, I went ahead and attached it all together. From there, we can plug USB power into the battery, and once you hit the little button on the battery, everything powers up nicely. For the HDMI input, I just used a female full HDMI to male micro HDMI. And to keep the wires all tidy, I just threw a rubber band around the whole thing. From there, we can mount the whole thing to the top of the camera, plug the HDMI in, and now we have a completed wireless HDMI setup. Now let's test the range of this system. I want to see how far away I can take the receiver from the transmitter and still get a clean signal. Starting from where the camera was at, I took the director's rig and started to leave the studio and head upstairs. My studio is in a basement, so this will be an interesting test to see how far I can go throughout the house. Another thing to keep in mind is this is a very old house, and instead of just drywall and studs, in the walls there's a ton of lath and plaster as well as a thick metal mesh, which is notoriously bad for signals. I was able to go upstairs and go throughout the entire first floor without any disconnections. But when I tried to go outside, I did lose signal. Luckily, when I went back inside, the receiver was able to pick the signal back up. From there, I went upstairs, so now we are 2 stories away from where the actual camera and transmitter are. And things went pretty well until I went into the bathroom. Fun note about the bathroom, not only is there tile on the floor, but there is about 4 inches of concrete essentially, and that's just the way they did floors back in the day. But leaving the bathroom, I was able to reconnect once again. And keep in mind, the camera with the transmitter is in the basement 2 stories below us in one far corner of the house. So I decided to go as far away as I could in the house from the transmitter. As I neared the furthest point from the camera as I could in the house, I did lose connection once again. But going back into the landing of the upstairs, I was able to reconnect once more. So in the end, I am very happy with the range of this unit. I was able to get roughly about 45 feet from the transmitter in a building 2 stories away from the transmitter. And I am working with 1920s crazy construction. So we're talking about really tough walls to transmit a signal through. I wasn't able to test line of sight, but according to Nyrius, we're looking at around 100 feet for line of sight. So a couple things, let's go over cost, let's talk about runtime with all the battery options, and then finally recommendations and where something like this really comes in handy. So first let's talk about cost. The wireless HDMI system itself costs $250. All the rigging you see here, which does not include the unit as well as a monitor, but does include all the batteries and all the other parts, was under $400. I think it was $384 or so. So pretty affordable considering what you're getting with a package like this. Now I know some of you are wondering about battery life, and I did do a test on that using this little baby Anker battery. So what I did is I hooked this up to a GH4 shooting at 4K, which, I don't know if that makes a big difference, but at any rate, it was able to go over 2 hours. I think it was over 2.5 hours for this little battery. So if you get something slightly larger, you're gonna get that much more juice. And that's for the transmitter. For the receiver, it barely dropped 1 LED out of 5. So, and that was powering the receiver as well as a 12-volt monitor. So this thing's gonna last forever. The small guy, it just depends on how big of a battery you add to it. So continuously streaming HDMI HD signal, I was able to get 2.5 hours. Now, what about recommendations? Why would you even want a system like this? First of all, it's just really handy to have a wireless system. When I shot a lot of corporate video stuff, often we have several little setups and we'd be moving around a manufacturing plant or something. And it was always a pain to be dealing with monitors for clients to watch and look at. So to have something completely wireless that you could either use with a tiny monitor like this or a large one and move around very quickly is really, really handy. Another use is for lighting. It's really difficult to set your camera up, look at the camera, run over, adjust the light, go back to the camera, check it again. So to have a system like this, you can take this with you over to the light you're going to adjust the light, and immediately see the changes on screen. So it's great if you're a one-man band or just operate on a small crew like that. Another specific use for this is you can tie it into your already existing monitoring setup. So if you have a big dedicated monitor, as long as you have an HDMI pass-through, you could connect this little transmitter to that pass-through as a dongle. Then you could simply run around with this as a second reviewing monitor. So there's a gazillion ways you can use it. And I really love that literally anything that has an HDMI input or output will work with this system, which is really awesome. So that does it for this review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have, hit that subscribe button down below to make sure you don't miss future videos here at DSLR Video Shooter. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to help you out. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.